Well, we billed this one as the Scottish Championship's wife swap, but instead it evoked another mid-2000s Channel 4 reality programme. As if ordered there by super nanny Jo Frost herself, both sets of supporters had no choice but to sit in their naughty chairs and consider all the awful things they'd ever done, as Greenock, Morton and Rovers combined to grind out the most attritional of 0-0 draws. If Ian Murray and Dougie Imrie had bags of intel on their former charges, it did little more than cancel each other out. And both sides will need to improve if they're to pull themselves clear of the relegation fight before the real punishment begins. This is the Oh No 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 podcast. My name is Duncan Cameron, and I'm joined tonight by Blair Hopcroft by himself. How are you, Blair?
I'm all right, mate. I'm looking forward to the first half an hour episode of this podcast because, to be honest with you, the highlight thus far has been that introduction because the game was absolutely rotten.
Yeah, it
was murder.
It's tough when you get 6.5 minutes and then for highlights, you already know you're onto a stinker, and then I think the sort of the minute mark in those highlights is J. Rowe ducking to let the ball go out for a throw-in from kickoff.
Yeah.
having had an extended look at the team lines.
Yeah, I was going to say a long look at the team lines.
Yeah, it's yeah. And listen, we only obviously we go back to the highlights for the sake of the podcast. You and I were both there. And the most on the subject of wife swap, I don't know if you remember this, the most notorious subject of an episode of Wife Swap, it was Wife Swap USA, was a 6-year-old laddie called King Curtis. Yeah,
can't take his bacon off of him.
Exactly. Bacon is good for him. And he said, chicken nuggets is my family. Yeah. And when it was on an episode of Wife Swap, and his new mum came into the house, and he said that she acts like she's the queen and we're the sorry people.
I said that sorry people. I was like, there's a line in there somewhere.
Is it fair to say that the sorry people include anybody who paid £22 to watch that game yesterday?
Yes, absolutely, mate. And the bus or petrol money that it took to get there. Oh man, it's funny because like it's always pretty much the same routine for me after a game. Kind of back on the bus, and it's either a text or a phone call from my wife, and it's how was the game? I saw the result, and quite often, even she says, like quite often it'll be a 0-0, and I'll go, aye, but it was actually quite a decent game. I quite enjoyed it. I was like, that was every bit a 0-0. Like I even said, like I have no idea what we're going to talk about in this podcast tomorrow because nothing happened. Like it was just a really, really bad game of football. Two teams that just did very little of anything. Weirdly though, I did see somebody on Twitter, a Morton fan, describe it as a thrilling 0-0. So I don't know what they've been watching every week, but if that's thrilling for them, I feel, because that was brutal.
I was thinking about the last game at Cappielow where it was almost like by rights should have been a brutal 0-0, but we got that goal from the long ball that Easton headed over the keeper. Though there was Josh Mullen's red card, and then there was that kind of goalmouth scramble. I was pining for the days of a goalmouth scramble, and I would need to go back and check, but I'm pretty sure we talked about that game as being like really dull. Nothing happened. Yeah. It was a blockbuster compared to yesterday.
Massively.
In terms of we get lineups at 2:00. The sort of big news for that was the absence of Paul McMullen and new signing Innes Cameron through injury. Lewis Vaughan made his first start since coming back, and Paul Niso came in with Andy Winter and Josh Mullen dropping out. Particularly disappointed to see Innes Cameron not make the squad.
Particularly disappointed that it basically, because we spoke about it midweek, like about what we would like to happen. We didn't go into an actual team lineup or whatever, but it was like it needs to be different. I mean, that last half an hour at Ayr was really good. The hour before it was pretty turgid, and he seemed to just go back to the same system, the same relatively similar lineup anyway. Not exactly the same Vaughan was in, which is fair enough. but same kind of shape and feel as that first hour at Ayr. And yeah, is that not just the most Rovers thing ever? Sign a big striker, and he's had 2 weeks to get fit, having come up the road, and has a tight hamstring, so isn't he playing? Like, you couldn't make it up. Honestly, like that news broke, and we were pretty much just passing sort of Glasgow Airport on the road. And if I'd been in the car, I might have just went to Braehead. Like, honestly, just got to the shops. Because you just knew, I did anyway, at that point, I was like, oh, man, it's more of the same. Yeah, no great.
No, and it sounds like, I mean, not a huge amount of detail, but it sounds like Paul McMullen's injury could be fairly significant.
Talk of a scan, eh?
Yeah, more than just Dougie Imrie said about Ennis Cameron, it was a case of, don't risk him this week and he should be okay for Friday. Yeah. Paul McMullen, it sounds like it will be a fair bit longer than that, which, despite, he's obviously not been on red hot form, does give us something that we're not getting otherwise. So that is bad news.
No good.
Burning through talking points already.
Yeah, I was going to say that's us done for the day.
Yeah. There really was. We both just said exactly this off air, but it's kind of bears repeating. A lot of the time when I watch highlights before a recording like this, I find it sort of changes my perception of the game. I think sometimes you walk out of a game on a Saturday, especially sometimes when there's been like a late goal, and it's like the lasting effect that you walk away with isn't necessarily reflective of the overall 90 minutes. And when you've had a day to think about it or to not think about it, as is often the case, and then you watch the highlights, it kind of recontextualises it and you go, actually, you know what, first half with a lot of chances and whatever it is, or, that I thought that guy was making mistakes, but actually he's done quite a lot of good stuff as well. Not the case for yesterday.
No.
I watched the highlights, I was like, this is almost worse than I thought it was. There was something about I really like Cappielow. I think it lends not in the traditional sense an atmosphere. It lends there's a certain sort of it's the right setting for football that I think serves to kind of lift the whole experience a little bit. It feels like you're watching proper football. And when you then wait a day and just watch the highlights back, on the laptop in the kitchen as I did, it's like, this is abysmal. This is absolutely terrible. I mean, in terms of the highlights, Curtis Main hits the post. Ewan Wilson has a shot that goes just wide, but they're both from very kind of narrow angles. And from a Rovers perspective, Lewis Vaughan has a shot kind of on the spin. We actually think he does pretty well with it. He does take it on his left foot, and it's a comfortable save for Murray Johnson. That's everything I've got for the first half. Taking the first half as a whole, really, were you in any way surprised by that sense of the game, given how well we know Ian Murray, if not necessarily this Morton team? Were you surprised by the way the first half went?
I suppose actually in hindsight, I mean, I can't honestly say I was surprised at the time. I wasn't particularly involved. Like it just all seemed to be kind of happening, and there was just nothing to kind of get behind. It was a really weird. I must admit, I don't share your love of Cappielow. I mean, it's the worst legroom in Scottish football. My shins are still aching today. You do get a pretty decent vantage point being that little bit higher up, but there are very few games that I can remember going to that have involved Ian Murray's Wraith Rovers. Actually, there was a few towards the end, but few where it was just as boring as that. Like, and I'm not. It's such a cliched thing, 0-0 draw. It was boring. It really was. Like the until I don't know, maybe an hour in, when it kind of went from wife swap to Royal Rumble, and they just seemed intent on kicking lumps out of each other. It just the game just seemed to pass by with very little incident, very little happening. Referee blowing continually for nothing free kicks, nothing fouls. Boys falling over themselves and pulling others down with them and stuff. It was a real lack of quality throughout the game. But I think more than anything, and it's something we kind of spoke about in the group chat a little bit last night, and I suppose it'll be the framework certainly for me in terms of how I felt about the game. It was just, there was a real lack of bravery in any way, shape or form. Like it just, and actually I'd say that for both teams, but the Rovers in particular, no running in behind, no kind of overlap, no pressing, trying anything. Vaughan, to give him his dues, Vaughan did. I thought actually, given how little happened in the game, I thought Vaughan actually did okay. And certainly he tried stuff. But other than that, it just felt safe. Really, really safe.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like, on Lewis Vaughan, I can sort of rerun in my own mind the same thing that happened 3 or 4 times, which is exactly what you say about bravery, and it's what other people aren't doing, which is he was not dropping deep necessarily, but kind of dropping out of the front line. So he's maybe 30, 35 yards off the kind of byline on the right-hand side, and he's facing the wrong way, and he asks for the pass. But when he gets that pass, he turns. And he turns his man. And sometimes he turns his man and turns into his man, and he loses the ball. But
at least he's trying something, though.
Yeah, I don't think it's unfair to say that most of his teammates on yesterday's evidence in the same scenario will just pass that ball backwards. They'll control it and play it back in the direction that they're facing. And that's where it just becomes very stolid, very staid, and just difficult to see where a goal was going to come from.
Yeah.
And it starts to feel like, and listen, I think as a fan base, and certainly I know I'm guilty of this at times as well, I think we lionise Lewis Vaughan. And I mean, personally, I think he merits it, but it felt at times in that first half like it was going to be like Lewis Vaughan is going to have to come deep to get this ball, square it to Lewis Vaughan to create something for Lewis Vaughan to finish. Like,
yeah, totally.
That just didn't seem to be a huge amount else going on, really.
No.
And I just a lot of attacking moves that seem to involve either one or both of Darragh O'Connor or Paul Hanlon.
Yeah.
Like, and very safe and very boring. Like, just I don't know. I mean, what would you put that down to if you were looking for reasons for that?
See, I'm really torn. I mean, I literally dropped this in the group chat this morning. Like, I kind of came in a wee bit late this morning. There was a conversation going on between a few of you about Darragh O'Connor, and he's kind of drifting to the right-hand side, almost as a right-back, taking the ball and then kind of shelling it long or whatever. And the fact that what we were lacking was that pass into the midfield, somebody to turn, basically Sean Byrne was the conversation, and it's absolutely justified. But my kind of 10 pence on it was that it felt really tactical, because it wasn't just once or twice, it was all the time. And it wasn't just drifting to the right-hand side. The centre halves were splitting as far as they could go. And Doherty was actually dropping in, almost like a third centre half. It was like 3 at the back at times. And there was, in my mind anyway, a bit of tactics to it, because that's where Vaughan was looking for the pass. And O'Connor found him 3 or 4 times actually in that first half. Kind of rolled the ball into feet. He also rolled the ball at play once, rolled it straight to their winger at one point. And do you know what I mean? There was bits in between and a few kind of hooked balls up the line and stuff. But he's a centre half, and he's a centre half who, I think it's fair to say, his distribution isn't his strength. You know, he's not there for his ball playing ability. He's there to be a big,
he's not Sergio Ramos.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was like, well, to me that's tactical, and the ball going up to Vaughan and then kind of working around a bit and then just basically coming straight back to the centre halves. I'm like, it happened too many times for it to be just the players being fair. For me, it felt like keeping possession was somehow the message, the tactics. And then I watched Imrie's interview because I didn't watch it last night, to be fair. I watched it this afternoon, and it was like he's talking about exactly what we're talking about: a lack of bravery and a lack of running in behind, and I'm thinking, and a lack of crosses into the box. And I'm thinking, so if it's not his tactic, why is it no changing? And that's where I'm kind of torn a little bit, because it's still early days. It's not his squad. I certainly don't want to criticise him. I don't think he's doing a bad job by any stretch. But it's like there's 3 or 4 times now where he's made changes and he's almost created a little blueprint for himself about how he can make us better. So there was that sort of 20 minutes, half an hour against Queen of the South. There was the last half an hour against Ayr, where it was both basically the same thing, which was getting the young boys on that want to carry the ball and want to run with the ball, having Doherty at right back. As much as I'm on the J Rowe train, I just think Doherty's a better right back, and I don't think he's the best centre midfielder we've got. So he's kind of laid it out a few times and has managed to change it, but just keeps reverting back again to this same setup. And then he says we don't have enough crosses in the box, but Gibson, Chin and Mullen don't even make it on the park in 90 minutes. And I don't know anymore.
The J Rowe train, by the way, I think we have to call the locomotive. Anyway, the only person in the podcast who would have laughed at that.
It's true.
I think that the theory is sound on what you were talking about there, where the Rovers have got the ball on the back line, centre half split, Doherty drops in and hopes to pull someone with him, and O'Connor goes out, as you say, basically to the touchline, effectively goes out to that wide right point. At that stage, Rowe is then pushing right on, because we've not put a Mullen or a McMullen on that right-hand side. We don't have a winger up there. So Rowe is really going to go. And this is where Vaughan drops into that pocket, basically. So he's almost in a sort of inside right position, and he's available. And I think the sort of platonic ideal of that is that O'Connor's able to basically play the ball into Vaughan's feet, and he can then take it, turn, and play in Rowe.
Yep.
Who's then already basically going great guns, and as he brings it in, he can then either cross it for Hamilton. He's got options from Niso and Brown and Easton sort of around, or he can cut it back to Vaughan, who's still going to be kind of on the scene. But the problem is we never got that in full flow. We were kind of getting it in stages. So rather than it being like O'Connor plays it to Vaughan, who cuts it into the path of Rowe, who's already on the run, it was like O'Connor plays it to Vaughan, who takes a touch, has to try and turn, can then play the ball to Rowe, who's had to stop running because otherwise he'll be offside. So he receives the pass to feet, but now he's got squared up by his fullback, so then he has to come back to either Vaughan or probably Brown, who's come over.
I was going to say it was Brown that was coming in, aye.
The defence is set. Anyway, and at that point, you're just kind of, and we never, at no point, I mean, it's obviously had a fair bit of attention. It's in the second half, but Ewan Wilson, the kind of fresh air kick. But just like,
you shouldn't have laughed, but it was funny. It was right in front of me.
You feel bad because, like, obviously it's tough on him.
Brutal.
But I mean, it was funny. It's just like slapstick stuff. The reason I bring it up is because that for every opportunity we had to put a cross in, that was how it felt. Where the reason he miskicks it is because he can't just take a step and cross it. He has to do that sort of like, because he's squared up. So you have to kind of do a little false step to try and create the yard to get the ball by the fullback. That was every crossing opportunity that we had.
Yeah.
I can see Rowe doing it in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, probably without the fresh air, because he had maybe 2 of them, he managed to have a go and it got blocked. And the other 4, he just played backwards. And we kind of recycled and tried to go again. But there was just never any incisiveness, never any... I wish we never carried the ball at any point either.
Yeah.
That was
I
the
keep
other
coming
thing.
back to that. Their fullbacks did do that. There was 3 or 4 times actually. Longridge on one side, kind of meandering down the left, and then was it Ballantyne that was playing? Right back,
number 2. Yeah.
There was a couple of times he kind of broke through, and I'm watching them and I'm thinking that's the only thing our boys didn't do. And I know everybody's different. I would be less frustrated if J. Rowe tried to beat a man 5 or 6 times and didn't manage than just this continual no even trying. Like, that again.
Yeah, it's tricky with Rowe. Like you, I really like him. But it feels like he's got very specific attributes that work really well. And it's like, he's so good in the air. He's actually so good in the air. But it feels like a lot of the time you almost need to manufacture situations where you're putting it on his head. Like, you almost want him on the overlap, competing in the air, rather than knock it into the channel from a run onto. And but even there's a bit in the highlights in the first half where Vaughan gets caught in possession. I mean, he reckons he's been fouled. I'm 50-50 on it. But then Grant Gillespie just runs away and just runs 60 yards.
Carries the ball, yeah.
And I was like, I never really did that. Never really did that at all. And I think this is I think that, and this is an old line of mine, and I'm going to go back to it again. I think it comes into the composition in the midfield. And it is missing Sean Byrne in part, but it's also missing just a player we haven't had and don't have. And it's that really what we have is a midfield that's completely set up to battle. They'll battle and they will run without the ball, but not with it. They're not dribblers. They're not going to take the ball and go and carry it 40 or 50 yards or go and beat a man and run beyond. Like, there's absolutely... I mean, you won't find a harder working midfield 4, or midfield 3, than Doherty, Brown, Inseal that we had yesterday. But, again, certainly in the evidence of yesterday, there's not a huge amount of football in it. There's not a huge amount of... because I think the thing is, the reason I think Jordan Doherty is in that midfield is basically to be Sean Byrne. Yeah. But we're not really using him like that. As you said, a lot of yesterday, he was just dropping into the back line. Yeah. But almost as a kind of decoy, more than it being a case of like what you would get with Byrne, where he would drop into the back line, then he would receive the ball, then he would move 10 or 15 yards and pass it 40 yards. We just never had that, really, at any point. It feels like the entire pattern of the game, I mean, for both sides, I think the entire pattern of the game, it felt like for the Rovers, it was Darragh O'Connor playing the ball up the line. Whether that was directly or potentially coming inside, but Darragh O'Connor basically on the right-hand side, playing the ball forwards, largely unsuccessfully. And for Morton, it was taking corners, largely unsuccessfully. They seem to have a dozen corner kicks that really didn't come to much at all. And obviously, it just made for a very poor game. I mean, the other thing as well, just to look at Morton for a second, I mean, their goalkeeper was signed on loan at the back end of the week, making his first appearance. You know, one of these kind of rent on loan keepers. That makes sense. Not quite on Kieran Wright's level, but I think Murray Johnson's, if you need a keeper at short notice, he'll turn up and he'll do a job, which he did yesterday. You've then got, is is it Lapata Young, Lapata White?
The centre half that
Yep.
he's come up. Is it Leeds or Bradford or something? He's come up for, isn't it?
Listen, I don't know his name, mate. I certainly don't know where he's come from.
Somewhere down south. I actually thought he looked okay, to be fair.
He did, but I think that was his first ever game of senior football.
Was it really?
I believe so. I haven't fact checked that, but someone said it to me yesterday. And then Ian Wilson, the other centre half, and he's a midfielder. Now, as you say, I think all three of them played really well. Ian Wilson got the sponsors man of the match in the ground. I would agree with that. I thought he was the best player in the park.
I thought he was very good,
But it's not a brilliant headline from a Rovers standpoint when you've got a keeper making his debut, a defender playing his first ever game, and a midfielder. That's the central defence. Totally. And we didn't ask him any questions. Ian Wilson, I think the reason I thought he was man of the match is he was kind of one step ahead. It was like he almost had to do very little defending because he was reading the game so well. He was cutting stuff out before it started, and he made a couple of really decent challenges almost in the midfield when he'd stepped out.
Yep. I was going to say he carries the ball as well.
Mm-hmm. He's a really good player. Has been for a long time. I think it's injuries that have held him back. But
absolutely,
you've got to be sure. You've got to get more change out of a team that's setting up like that. Surely.
But is that no part and parcel just of the way that we set up, the way that we play? So the more I've kind of watched sort of Dougie Imrie side, he subscribes to the same kind of magazines as you do about fullbacks. I think he wants his fullbacks up and down the line, and he wants them doing that job and chipping in. It's very much a kind of round the side and pushing on. But he's basically got two fullbacks who can't, won't, or don't put in too many crosses. Certainly not good crosses. We know that they've got it in them. I mean, the goal we scored against Queen's Park in the KDM Cup a few weeks back, a great ball in from Ewan Wilson on the left. So he's clearly got it in the locker, but we're not doing it anywhere near enough. So if you've got a centre half who's never played senior football alongside a centre midfielder, you're thinking, let's get some crosses in the box. Let's pepper them. Do you know what I mean? Even to the extent that you question, do you, and as good as he was 2 weeks ago and as much as he needed to come in, do you not play Vaughan from the start and play Hamilton and Winter, two big boys that are going to go in and kind of noise them up and whatever? I mean, I'm not advocating I've done that, but at least there's a thought process behind it. I just didn't feel like we do that. It's starting to feel a little bit like that. That thing it's always misquoted against. I think it's Einstein that's always put against it about doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. It just feels like that's what we've fallen into. We're doing the same things we were doing a year ago, 18 months ago, and expecting a different outcome from it. And we're not getting a different outcome. But we'll try it again next week. The shape has gone back to what it was before. So we've kind of gone away from the back three, quite rightly. But the penetration's not got any better. The speed of play's not got any better. Certainly the crosses into the box haven't got any better. The forward play's not got any better. Defensively, we're much of a muchness. Maybe a bit better, actually.
Defensively, I think defensively we're really good. That is one thing. Yeah. That's the saving grace, really.
But I don't think we were ever really bad, though.
No,
under Robson, we had our moments. We absolutely had our moments to kind of defend cross balls and we'll let them run at us and stuff. And I don't think that's massively changed. But I don't think for all that we've changed in the last 3 months, 4 months, I don't feel like we've got any better. The patterns of play, they're better to watch for the most part. We can create more chances, but I don't know, it just feels like we're chucking stuff at a door and hoping some of it goes in.
It's funny because we've been better in very concentrated spells, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
I suppose I'm thinking specifically of 2 games. We beat Queen's Park and we beat Ross County.
Ross County, I was going to say, yeah.
you could argue that Hamilton game in the cup as well, but I would be inclined to discount it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like beyond that, it has been much of a muchness, I think is the best way to put it. And it's like Dougie Imrie's come in, and I mean, you guys talked about it midweek. Like, there's obviously a lot of change at the football club.
Yeah.
And I imagine the working environment has changed quite a bit. But, well, I mean, I'll ask you the question. Like, if you'd been away for a few months, you'd been away in a rig, you hadn't had any signal on your phone, you came back, I think, would you be forgiven for wondering if Barry Robson was still in the dugout yesterday?
Yeah, at points it's probably fair. I'd say it's not as overtly direct as what it was under Robson. It's still getting. There are times where it gets quite direct, but yeah, it's a really good point actually. To be fair, there's not a. This has got really depressing really quickly, Duncan. This is
Yeah,
there's not a great shake between it at the moment. But in fairness, it's all the same players.
That's exactly what I was going to say. How much of that is down to personnel?
And I think this is the thing I'm finding most frustrating is I'm hearing Imrie's interviews and I'm hearing him saying the same things we're saying. So why is it no changing? Or why are the players not getting dropped? And this is the bit I kind of keep. I kind of get you've got to give them a chance and you've got to kind of coach them through it and you've got to make changes and stuff. But like, I don't know. Like if that game, if we've got a game on Friday night, does he make a lot of? Do you see him making a lot of changes on Friday night? Supposing Ennis Cameron doesn't make it, so isn't he fit, and he's got basically the same personnel available as what he had on Saturday. Do you think he puts out a different team?
I don't know. for two reasons. Partly because it's a very different ask. St Johnstone. Yeah. I think if we were playing Airdrie or Queen's Park, a team that's broadly in the same category as us and Morton, it's maybe a slightly different question. I wouldn't be overly surprised to find that there's a bespoke approach for St Johnstone, which I imagine will largely be frustrating them and try to draw them now. Which I don't disagree with.
But I don't think that was an overly attacking team you put out.
No, I don't think it was either. But I think there's a kind of difference to it. The second aspect, sorry, I said there was two. The second aspect, he is making some changes.
Yeah.
So you like Andy Winter. You said that why are players not getting dropped? Andy Winter, I think you would have to argue was dropped. Unless he's got like a niggle and Dougie Imrie would have played him otherwise. He came out of that. I mean, Josh Mullen comes out as well. There was a change of shape in that element. We at Ayr United we played with two wingers. We didn't play with two wingers yesterday. We played with Easton on the left wing and Vaughan as a sort of, as I say, a kind of inside right, almost a sort of false 10. It was a very lopsided kind of formation, from...
Brown seemed to be kind of right side, and then he wasn't, and...
Yeah, I think it's basically a case of you've got, like... Hamilton is a very clearly defined role as a number 9. Easton is a very clearly defined role as the left winger. You've then got Vaughan, as I say, I think if you were plotting it, would be sort of the number 10, but he's got kind of licence to roam. And then it's Insue and Brown are just sort of like the engine room, basically, where it's like, look, the two of you, one of you is broadly on the right-hand side, one of you is broadly on the left, but really go wherever you're needed and just be the energy. And then you've got kind of Doherty behind them. And that's where I think a lot of the problem is, because you're not really progressing the ball through the middle of the park.
No.
Unless you like, it's not the game for either Insue or Brown. It's not what they're good at. And I think there is an element of, like I said before, we just don't have the player to do it. So, how much wisdom is there in continually asking someone to do something they can't do? I'd argue not very much at all.
No.
It's just, it's tricky to watch, but it's tricky to resolve as well. But, listen, we might as well just there's no bullet points for this game at all anyway. So, as you said, like Dougie Imrie's interview, he talks about being too slow in the build-up, talks about maybe trying to be too clever, need to be braver. But 70 minutes in, we get Ross Matthews on for Paul Incio. 5 minutes after that, we get Kai Montague and Andy Winter on for Jack Hamilton and Dylan Easton. Are those brave substitutions?
Not for me. The Matthews for Incio was probably more to the fact that he was on a booking and had committed a couple of fouls, and they were up in arms every time anybody hit the deck, and you were probably not long from the referee doing something kind of daft. So him and Brown both on a booking, it kind of made more sense for him to make way and Matthews to come in. And it's a game that suits Matthews as well, that kind of swashbuckling, throwing yourself about and firing into tackles. That's his absolute bread and butter. But the other two, for me, Winter for Hamilton, it's probably the first time we've seen Hamilton come off and Winter be the sole striker. I thought he did all right. Nothing really. Nothing came. Nothing really kind of happened. I don't think he did anything wrong. I did think his movement was a bit better. I thought he opened play up a couple of times, a wee bit more, but the game was kind of getting a bit stretched by that point anyway. But I have to say, no disrespect to Kai Montague at all. I know I don't think that's a brave substitution in the slightest. I think Chin, Gibson, maybe even Mullen are players who are going to go and get you a chance or two. They're going to get the ball into the box. Whereas for me, Montague, I think it might even be you that put it in the group chat talking about it, but it's that he'll run about and he'll add loads of energy, but he's no changing the game.
This is it. And sort of briefly on Winter, first of all, like, you can only draw with the pencils you've got. Like,
yeah,
you need to put a striker on. He's the striker on the bench, so that's fine. Right? No issues with that. It's just that kind of straight swap. But yes, on that point about, like, Montague comes on, and again, as you say, this is not a criticism of Kai Montague. I'm not saying that, don't think he's got anything to bring or anything like that at all. But I just think that if you get 15 minutes to go and it's 0-0, and you turn around and you look at that bench and you think, right, pros and cons. What am I going to get from each of these guys? What might I give away with each of these guys? I think Montague is the one who has, to use another catchphrase of mine, he's the one who has the kind of smallest bandwidth. The distance between the very, very best you're going to get from Kai Montague and the very, very worst you're going to get from Kai Montague is the smallest of all of those players.
Yeah, that's
because he's going to come on. He's going to come on into the middle of the park in a game that is already bogged down in the midfield. He's going to come on. He's going to be really busy in that midfield. He's going to put himself about. He's going to get involved. But ultimately, he's not going to gamble on anything. He's not going to go out and be in the position where he might give the ball away in a dangerous area, because he's not the kind of guy to go and take those chances. In the same way that Brown and Matthews and Incio, he's in that same category. He's a central midfielder who's going to go in to the centre of the midfield, be in that already busy place, keep it busy, and probably continue the pattern of this game. Whereas when you look at the others, you go, right, Richard Chin could come on, and at best, he could go and beat a couple of guys, square the ball for Lewis Vaughan, and we're 1-0 up. But maybe he's going to try a World Cup Willie pass and give the ball away and we get beat. Lewis Gibson, the same. Josh Mullen, so listen, could come on, whip in an incredible cross, but he's been sent off twice this season, including once here already. So maybe that's...
Yeah. Yeah, that's true, actually. I never thought of it that way, because Mullen, for me, Mullen was the one I was surprised didn't get the nod. From the point of view that I feel like his bandwidth is also pretty small. Yeah. And you throw into that the set pieces and the free kicks that he's going to deliver for you. And it kind of takes... I never actually considered the red cards. That's probably fair, actually.
Yeah, to be fair. I mean,
it was maybe harsh, but it's fair as well.
I was being quite glib when I said that, but it is also undeniable. Yeah. You know, it has happened. You can't just pretend it hasn't. But, I mean, I don't think it's like... Had Josh Mullen come off the bench, I don't think he would have got sent off, put it that way.
No.
And again, though, if the manager's saying, "Oh, I want more crosses," like there's the crossing machine that's sitting on the bench. But again, though, to kind of counter my own argument, like, is 0-0 at Cappielow the time to be going and making gambles? Like, I mean, it is... I want to come back to a wider point about our away form at home, but to take in isolation first, is a point at Cappielow a bad point?
Oh, I suppose it's a bit of a cliche now, I suppose, but at any point away from home in the Championship is never a bad point. I think my counter to all of that is I don't think some of those subs that you could make are a gamble. Like, it's not like we're up against a side who are tearing us to shreds and we're clinging on. There was very little happening in the game. And to be fair, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it's a bit, it's the same argument we have about boards of directors and stuff. It's easy to spend anybody else's money, but it's also probably easy to gamble with somebody else's job. Because ultimately it's Dougie Imrie's job to make sure that we get as many points as we can get out of the season. But there is a little bit of me that thinks kind of not, and I don't think, as I say, I don't honestly think gamble's the right word, but not having a go, really, in that second half, making those changes. It just felt, again, it felt like a lack of bravery. And actually, I think that's kind of part and parcel for the squad, but I think Imrie's, I hadn't really considered it that way, to be fair, until tonight, halfway through the show. But you've kind of got to level that at him. They're not brave. He's not putting us in a situation. I mean, we've see if you take that last 20 minutes as an isolated thing. You and Wilson taking those free kicks. There's two of them taking those free kicks, and like, oh my God, brutal, right? And I think to myself, had he put on Mullen instead of putting on Montague, you've at the very least got a good set piece coming in. A couple of corners maybe at the end, you've got a good set piece delivery coming in. There's something there that you can go, right, okay, that's I see why he's put him on. And I genuinely don't want to get in a situation where I'm slagging off a young kid, because I think Montague's absolutely fine. I just don't know what he offered in that moment, that when, like, as you put it, turned around and he looked at the bench and thought, right, Kai, you're the man. I don't get the logic.
As I say, I think it's, if you're happy to draw 0-0, I don't necessarily think Dougie Imrie was. I don't think he's consciously going, let's get the point and get up the road. Yeah. But that's the way that I can most readily make sense of what happened, basically. Yeah. As an aside, set pieces over the whole afternoon were
awful.
Like the Vaughan takes a corner that he puts into the feet of the first man, which I can only assume he's mishit it. I mean, obviously he has. He didn't want to do that. That's almost the most forgivable of them all, because some of the others, it's like the decision making. There's one, Dougie Imrie talks in it, we would try to be too clever. So it's basically the last kick of the first half. Rovers have got a free kick, and Easton tries to sort of chip it in for, I think it is Vaughan who's running in, and he slightly overcooks it, but the run's mistimed anyway, and it just goes out of play. And it's like, we've created none all afternoon. the least you've got to do is, the bare minimum, is get your set pieces to be something. Morton had loads of corners and didn't create anything with them, but you've got to at least get them in the box. And this isn't one of these like never take short corner things. Like, you can take a short corner as long as it has a plan behind it that works and that makes sense. A lot of that, like of the two that Wilson had, I mean, there's one of them, he's about 40 yards out. The box is loaded up. It's quite central, so you can't sort of whip it in like we saw with Ben Dempsey at Somerset. But he's just sort of like chipping it.
He didn't
laterally.
Make the 18-yard box.
No. Like, it's headed away by a guy who's 20 yards out. And like, you could take all the defenders away. Just remove the defenders from that entire thing. And that delivery probably still needs 2 more touches before it can be a goal.
Yeah.
You chip it, you're going to have somebody's going to have to knock it down, probably like sort of laterally, almost over their own head, going to have to knock it across the box for somebody else to then kind of kick it into the goal. As I say, with no defenders, that's still going to take a little bit of technique. When you've got defenders who only need to just get themselves in the road, I just don't. It didn't look like it had a high degree of success, put it that way. The other point I wanted to mention there, just a wider talk about away form. Because again, I think this does inform the conversation to some degree. If we'd been winning all of our away games recently, and then we draw 0-0 at Cappielow, you're like, grand, fine, we'll take that. But 13 away games in the league, we have scored 6 goals. Now, we've only conceded 11, which is the same as St Johnstone. So we're doing all right defensively, doing really well defensively. But where we've scored 6, they've scored 20. And I was looking at this earlier on. So I've missed 2 away games this season. I wasn't at Ross County and I wasn't at Elgin right at the start of the season. So I've been to 15 games on the road this year, and I've seen 6 or 7, I think it is. I added up how much all those tickets have cost, and I'm not going to say what the cost per goal has been, because it's frankly an embarrassingly high number. But
and that's just tickets.
Exactly. That doesn't include going to Put Audrey and everything else, and the petrol that goes with it. Again, I think that does, as I say, that plays into this conversation, because it's not been an awful lot of fun, I suppose. And I don't think there's always I think sometimes football supporters can be quite entitled sometimes. And particularly in terms of like entertainment, when it's really a case of like, I'd take scrappy 1-0 wins every single week without question. I could not care less. But as I say, when you're repeatedly fortnight after fortnight away games, and you're scoring in fewer than 1 in every 2 of them, something needs to change. Like, so there's a big enough body of evidence there now where, like, entertainment value be damned. That's bad football. Like, there needs to be more of a plan, more of a strategy to go and actually force this issue that fundamentally something's not working when we go away from home in the Championship. And we had different managers and all this kind of stuff. And again, I didn't come into this expecting to be, quite so kind of vehemently negative. I think it's just wasn't a huge amount of positivity to come out of yesterday.
No, it really wasn't. I think the difference though with yesterday is there's a good few games. I mean, I'm the same as you. I missed the League Cup campaign because I was on holiday, and I've only missed Ross County away in the league is the only one I've missed so far in the league games, and so I've seen all the same goals as you've seen, and it has been tough. But at the same time, like, you go down to Ayr, and for an hour it wasn't very good, but for that last half an hour it was good, and we actually created some chances and we were peppering the goal, and you were trying to will them over the line. St Johnstone away was a whole other kettle of fish. It was like a real kind of battle of wills just to kind of stay in the game and stuff. And you came away with that kind of positivity around it. There have been a good few games now where you kind of come out and you go, we had a few chances, we just didn't take them. We've had a few chances. But yesterday was probably one of the first games where we really just didn't create anything. And I don't think they did either, in fairness. I don't think it was like we weren't lucky to get out 0-0. But often you're sitting watching a game and you're like, this game's got 1-0 written all over it. And at times it did kind of feel like that, but it felt like if it was going to happen, it was going to, bounce off somebody's arse and go in the bottom corner kind of thing at a corner. There was never going to be a moment of quality to kind of separate. And maybe that's just, do you know what, like, maybe that's just the nature of Dougie Imrie's first game back at Cappielow. That's got to play a part. You'd be daft to not think that a guy who's had the affinity that he's had with that club and the time that he's had with that club and what he's gone through while he's been at that club, to go back there again for the first time, it's got to be a bit odd. It's got to kind of take you off your game a little bit. Ian Murray's bound to be feeling a similar kind of thing, probably a little bit more wanting to get it up us than what Dougie Imrie is. But I do wonder if all of that kind of plays a part, because it just did feel like two teams that, as you said right at the outset, they just cancelled each other out.
There's also an element of both of these sides. See, you've had to put money on it now. I think both of those sides will be in the Championship next season.
Oh,
without really any concern, honestly. Not to wait and spend myself with a bold prediction.
I'm the same. I don't subscribe to this we're massively in trouble narrative that seems to have begun.
Nah, I just think that like I can't remember exactly how Davey framed it in the post-match interview where he was like, it's not a good point or a bad point, it's just a point, basically. But it's almost like,
doesn't help us, but it doesn't hurt us.
That's exactly what it was. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's basically where us and Morton are right now. Where actually, if we just draw every game between now and the end of the season, we'll be fine. I think the teams below us, probably all the teams below us, as in below us and Morton, they're probably at the point now where it's like, we need to put a run of wins together. I actually don't think, I see it. Maybe this is famous last word stuff, but like, I don't think we do. I think basically the teams below us are going to cannibalise one another. Saw that yesterday. Mm-hmm. So, like, again, I don't know who it was, but it was like an immediate reaction on Twitter. Somebody being like, Queen's Park have won a game. It's like, yeah, but Ross County have lost one. It was the same game. Like, that's going to keep happening. And it's just, basically, it's like, if, as you would expect, St Johnstone, Thistle win most of their games, Arbroath, Ayr United, Dunfermline win more games than they lose, which you would expect based on the pattern of the first half, there's not enough games left for...
No.
Bearing in mind, at least two of Queen's Park, Airdrie, Ross County to also then pick up all those points. And that is the overriding feeling I had watching that game yesterday, was this is two sets of players and I think clubs overall who are desperate for the summer. Mm-hmm. And not in like a can't wait to go on the beach way, in a this season's done. Like, short of a miracle, and I say a miracle, win 3 games in the bounce and you're basically back in the playoff contention, the top end. But neither of those sides have the belief they're going to go and win 3 or 4 games in the spin. And then evidence would support that they're not either. And I think it's basically a case of, at a certain point, particularly in the Championship, you get to a point where you go, yeah, you know what, if we were going to have a good season, it would have happened by now. And it's now just a case of, let's get to the summer. Let's reset all the counters, get back to 0, and maybe if we win our first 4 games in the spin next year, maybe we'll have a playoff charge. And that was how that felt to me. That was two teams who are And as I say, maybe they'll be proven wrong. Maybe it's complacency or whatever it is. But it looked to me like two teams who are going to finish between 5th and 7th.
Yeah.
And know it.
Yeah.
J. Rowe made a good tackle.
There was a foul right before it as well, to be fair. I thought Curtis Main bodying Paul Hanlon out the pitch in the build-up.
Yeah.
And to be fair to J. Rowe, he did really well, because if he mistimes that, that's not just a penalty, that's a straight red. With the kind of the scissory kind of nature of it, he timed it exceptionally well.
Yeah, it's a bit of chat on that one. It's 2-footed. Like, it's 2-footed in as much as J. Rowe has 2 feet. Like,
yeah,
because he's almost standing still. It's like the challenge comes to him. He's not diving into it. He has to just sort of shape his body to block it. He can't.
Yeah,
he can't move his other foot out of the way. But as you say, if he mistimes it, it's going to look terrible. But he doesn't mistime it. It's a perfectly good challenge. Is there anything else to be said for Greenock Morton 0, Wraith Rovers 0, Blair?
No, honestly, like the fact that we're 50 odd minutes into this, I don't know how we've done this, other than just basically whinging about everything going. I'm quite impressed.
Yeah,
it really is now. I mean, what was your thought? You obviously weren't on midweek with the 3,000 changes that have happened at Starks Park in the last 2 weeks.
So I think for me, I really enjoyed that episode, by the way. I listened to it on the way to Cappielow yesterday. And I thought you just kind of captured that all very well, and a lot of good points were made. So I think there's basically two. I'm always going to draw a line between those changes, categorise the two of them. Dean McKenzie on one side of the line, and then kind of everything else.
Everything else.
I think really everything else is basically day-to-day running of a football club stuff. John Potter, you'd maybe put slightly above that, given he had that kind of technical director role. But I'm more than happy to take the kind of face value explanation that kind of Rory laid out, and I thought that you summarised very well, which basically I think boils down to there was a bigger job in mind when he came in, and it sort of never materialised.
Never happened.
You know, it's like there's an old kind of mantra, or it's like dress for the job you want, not for the job you've got. That was like hire a technical director for the job you think he's going to have, not the one you need him to do just now. And it just never. Actually, I think totally well intentioned, but yes, I think the idea was that there would be youth teams and the women's team would be back and all this other kind of stuff that needed like a strategic overview, whereas actually the football department is all in aid of the first team, and that's fine. But then the first team manager can then basically be the guy for that. So as I say, on that front, totally fine. In terms of like Mark McKenna and the various other kind of changes that happened on that side, I think that's just the manager sorting out like one. It's like the kind of feeling I get from just looking at the timeline. Remember when Barry Robson came in, and whether it was said explicitly or not, it seemed pretty clear. He was basically told he had to keep Mickey Cameron.
Yeah. To the summer.
And he was, exactly, until the summer. Yeah. And then it was like the first time the sun came out from behind a tree, Mickey gets P45. Clark was there. Like CC on his tracksuit, he's desperately trying to scratch off. I get the feeling that this was the same idea, where it was basically, it might have been his choice, who knows, but that basically Dougie Imrie came in and it was like, right, let's get to the end of the January window. That's going to be busy, there's going to be enough to worry about. Let's just get through January, and then we'll make some changes. And he's got time to speak to people and all this kind of stuff, and now it's effectively what he wants.
And exactly the same thing's been happening at Cappielow, to be fair, because all the boys that have come in have been emptied by Ian Murray in the last 3 weeks. And
that's the way of the world. That's the way it goes, and that's what you would want it to be. Particularly in the, when you don't have this technical director job anymore. As I've just said, Dougie Imrie's now the head of the football department, so he should have, hiring and firing rights effectively.
Yeah, totally.
He should be able to say, yes, I want this guy.
It's his budget.
Sorry, XYZ. Exactly. And budget's probably a big part of it. Again, you guys talked about this where, he's looking at his ins and outs, and it's a case of, actually I could get this guy to do this job, or this guy to do this job, and I can replace the other three who were doing them previously, and I can spend that money on whoever for the summer. So, as you see, so for that, all kind of totally fine. In terms of the other side, the kind of boardroom side of things, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily got concerns around it, but that's not just a Monday to Friday, like this is what happens kind of thing. That is a bigger piece. I mean, I've never met Dean McKenzie, I've never spoken to him either, but just from spending an inordinate amount of time thinking and talking about Raith Rovers, you get a feel for who's doing what, who's there all the time, who's the driving force behind this, who's doing that, and Dean's name coming up all the time. And again, I think the way that you framed it made the most sense, which is that effectively he's a man who runs a number of businesses, and the one that's making his phone ring 40 times a day is the one that doesn't generate any revenue.
Any money whatsoever, yeah.
Exactly. And it's that kind of thing where I'm absolutely certain, like, Rory will be the same. He's trying to do different things. And it's like, so for Dean, like when Dean's at the office of the Converters group, I'm absolutely certain his phone is ringing multiple times a day from people at Starks Park saying, Dean, this thing's come up, or can I get approval for spending on this thing? And when he's at Starks Park, he's getting phone calls for the Converters office saying, Dean, somebody's just come in with this thing, could you and that can only go on for a certain amount of time. There's a reason why football clubs at the level below us are largely run by people who are already retired from their day jobs, and football clubs at the level above us are run by people who are paid to have full-time jobs to do that. And we are in this kind of little zone in the middle where you're kind of, quite literally, we are bouncing between these two models. And again, from the outside, it looks like they're taking the action that makes most sense to address that. So, Andrew Barrowman previously was obviously the employee who was charged with running the football club. And I think we saw a lot of him, and he was doing a huge amount of stuff. It was interesting, some of the stuff Rory was talking about in that interview. Excellent interview, by the way.
Yeah, really good.
There's a funny thing, a thing that I found almost paradoxical or contradictory almost at face value, where he said that a year ago the spending kind of got out of control, but that also they were a little bit complacent. And it's almost like you'd think that would be two opposite things. Like, you'd think complacency would be like, oh, the guys that we've already got are great, we don't need to go out and sign anybody else. And you'd think letting spending get out of control would be, oh, we've gone and brought in a whole load of guys. But ultimately, and again, someone was made redundant. I don't think this is a secret or a thing that's difficult to work out. There was a degree of unhappiness to from whatever angle it came from, with the role of chief executive, say, because the role was made redundant. It wasn't just that Andrew Barrowman was sacked. And I think from reading the job advert for this new general manager, it's the executive nature of it. I think Andrew Barrowman was in, and he was chief executive. So he was in the building every single day, doing who knows how many hours a week, full time, and strategic decision making, on the board, at board level, doing all that kind of stuff. He then left, and it felt like a lot of his duties seemed to then move to Dean who's then doing day-to-day, who knows how many hours, and on the board, and ownership stuff. But ultimately it becomes too much. That's too much for anyone. So now it looks like they're trying to basically split the difference. And a general manager who's going to come in, but when you look at the particular language of that job advert, and then you hear Rory talk it through, it talks a lot about operational responsibility. It talks about non-football management effectively. And so I think this is the big difference, is that whoever this person who comes in, they're not at board level. They're very specifically not at board level. And I think it's effectively introducing that middle point so that the day-to-day stuff all happens at Starks Park and all reports into one person who's a general manager, and they can then go to the board with things that they need. Yeah. And that seems to make sense to me. That's the, that looks like a model that makes sense. It's too big an organisation to be running without someone there all the time. I think we've seen that, and I think that Rory acknowledged that as well.
I wonder if that's where the complacency thing comes in, though, so this general manager role, as you say, is not at board level, so ultimately reports to the board, whereas Barman didn't, I don't know, but I would imagine didn't have to phone up Rory and Dean and say, boys, I'm thinking about doing this. Is that okay? There was a degree of, he is at, as you said, is at that level, he'll make the decisions himself. So I wonder if that's where the complacencies come in, is that there wasn't enough, and the overspending effectively, there wasn't enough checks and balances kind of going on in that role effectively, and it was one man freed up to kind of do whatever he wanted. I don't know.
That's sort of, that's how I would imagine it, basically.
Yeah.
I think if you've got a chief exec, you have someone who you are saying, right, you run the show. Like, we're the board, we have certain responsibilities, but ultimately we are putting you in charge.
This is your gig.
You're the chief executive of this business, and it's exactly that. You're not there to ask for permission. You're being given the job, and then you go and do it, and whatever it is, once a month or whatever, you go and you report to the board. You say, right, this is the stuff I've been doing, and some of it that'll be like the first time that they hear of it. You almost go from that extreme to the other when it becomes you don't have a chief exec or a general manager at all, because then the board are having to do the day-to-day stuff. So now, from hearing about stuff once a month, they're hearing about stuff multiple times a day, because every time somebody in the office needs something that goes above them, they have to go directly to the board. And every time somebody in the hospitality, and then they've got to go to them, and somebody in the football department, they go to the board as well. So what you're doing is almost trying to put in that kind of breakwater that says, right, actually, it might still be that the board are getting contact multiple times a week, but it's all at least coming through one person.
Yeah.
Or probably actually two, because you'll have, well, now it'll be Dougie Imrie for football stuff, general manager for non-football stuff. But it should, as I say, hopefully mean that you've not got your board members being swamped with stuff day to day when they're trying to do other stuff. But the really long piece that you guys already covered really well. The other thing is you still need more. The board needs to be bigger than three people. I think that seems pretty clear, and not just on a financial level. That's clearly the thing, is that you really want your board members to be incredibly independently wealthy if you can manage it. Like that's what you're after, really.
Yeah, that's the dream.
But still, you're looking at more than three for an organisation this size. I haven't gone and looked at the other boards of the clubs in the division, but I would imagine your average is 5 or 6, and that's 5 or 6 people with different skill sets, different ranges of experience, different contacts, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, without any kind of inside track whatsoever, I would be very surprised if the board didn't expand again in some shape in the relatively near future. But and then the other thing that's I was going to say interesting. This is only interesting to like me and maybe 4 other people, but it'd be interesting to see what happens with Dean's shares as well. So Robbie was talking about the excellent work that Alan and the Trust have done in just trying to create a series of graphs that actually make sense in terms of that side of things. This is one of these things that, again, for me and the other 4 people who care about this, you sort of find out later down the line that you get the statement that says, oh, this person's left his job, or this person's not doing this anymore. But so when Andrew Barrowman left, he had shares, and it was a case of like, well, hang on a second, what's going to happen there? And so it's almost a case of getting your company's house updates switched on, because Dean's holdings are not, insignificant. Put it that way.
No,
that is a chunk of the ownership of the football club. One of the 5 group companies I think we're up to. So it'll be interesting to see.
I do wonder if that won't change, though. I mean, I don't have an inside track. He obviously needs to step back from the day-to-day running of the club. But it certainly didn't sound to me in anything in that statement that he was walking away or he wanted nothing to do with the place. He's come away from the board, which is fair enough. Maybe in time, like a bit of perspective and a general manager in place. Maybe that's something that you can come back to.
That's what I mean. Like, genuinely, I think it's interesting to see what happens, especially, Rory's talking about potential takeover or potential investment. Sorry, you then have, is it a case of like, well, there's a possible angle for, there's potentially someone, or is it a case of, as you say, that Dean's actually like, well, you know what, I don't want to be involved day to day, but I'm happy to retain this ownership stake and make a back table. So that's all stuff that I say. I just think it's interesting to see. It's always intriguing to see who's involved to what degree. But as I say, the other stuff I thought was basically just day-to-day kind of football stuff that I would be lying if I didn't, if there wasn't a short intake of breath when I saw that, the kind of headline of that statement. It's like Dean stepping away and you go, oh, that's, that's not a good news headline, I suppose. Put it that way. That's not like
definitely not.
That's not something anybody was hoping to see. But ultimately, the wagons roll on. Have done for whatever it is, 143 years now, and it just somebody else will come to the table and we'll see what they can achieve.
Seen this movie before.
Exactly. This is it. And speaking of the wagon rolling on, I think we might as well mosey on down as well. So we will leave it there. I think we've killed enough time.
That was good. I cannot believe we've got this long out of that game.
No, I know. There'll be people looking at this when it pops up going, how long have they done that?
Checking Twitter to see if they missed a sign-in or an announcement of some kind.
Invented a new quiz format that takes 48 minutes at the end of an episode. Yes. But Phil, thank you everybody for listening. Hopefully that has been interesting. It's one of these games that I suppose like quite a few people won't have actually seen that game, and like the highlights.
Lucky them.
Aye, exactly. The highlights wouldn't have illuminated it much, so take it fast. It was not very good.
You did not miss anything.
Yeah, so maybe you've learned absolutely nothing. Anyway, thank you for listening. As always, we really do appreciate it. We will be back on, I think, provisionally Wednesday evening to look forward to the visit of league leaders St Johnstone and everything that will entail. And we will speak to you again then. Thank you and goodbye.